Hello and welcome to the David Watson podcast. And today I spoke with Lucy from Loose Cannon PR Agency. And we had a really good chat along the lines of, how do you present yourself? Press releases. What do people do right? Strategy. Talking to journalists. Who are your audiences? And there was some really useful information there and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And and Lucy was very open about what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And like I said, I think there's a lot of great advice there. Please, if you appreciate listening to Lucy, do check out her website. The link will be in the notes. And as always, please do like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is always appreciated. Thank you very much for listening. 2, 1. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And how are you?
I'm okay, I think. Yeah. Always have to sort of think, but I've got lots to be grateful for. I haven't been ill. Obviously, lockdown 3 is starting to pall. But I'm okay. I know there are lots of people who've really suffered, and life is a lot more difficult for them. So I count my blessings, and my hardest thing, we were just saying before we hit record, is managing my 2 teenage daughters and their mental health and their desire to get out there and see their boyfriends and all of those sorts of things. And they're managing their schoolwork and their cancelled exams and everything that they've got going on. So a plus trying to run my own business.
Yeah.
There is a bit of a juggle.
And that's because that's a good segue, really, isn't it? Because like many people up and down the country who have got children of all ages, but you have teenagers, everything about what is going on for them is unknown. They can't see their friends in person. They can't go to school. They can't do anything that they want to do. So they're stuck at home. And then on top of that, you're not only trying to run your own business, you've actually just started.
Yes. Yeah. Just started trading in October 2020.
Yeah.
What a time. What a time. But I mean, it is a juggle. And the reason I'm working for myself now is because I took redundancy from my previous job, which was for Wiltshire Creative, which, as some people may know, is a combination of Salisbury Playhouse, Salisbury Arts Centre, and also Salisbury Festival. They all 3 organisations merged to form Wiltshire Creative, and I was running their press office for them and all of their social media. So it was a very busy job when all the venues were going. But obviously I was furloughed for 6 months last year because all the venues were closed, everything ground to a halt. Quite a lot went online, but they didn't need the sort of PR and social media function in the way that I'd been providing it. So I was furloughed for 6 months. And as time went on, and they were very clear with us about the sort of cash position of the organisation, it was clear that a restructure was going to happen. So I thought, if redundancy comes up, I'm definitely going to take it. And I'm going to set up my own business and do what I do, but on an independent freelance basis. So that's exactly what I've done. So that's why I started in a pandemic, because I don't think you'd ordinarily start your own business. But there are lots and lots of people in the same position as me who've been made redundant or had a change sort of forced upon them. And actually, there's a huge amount of positivity out there in business. I've done lots of virtual networking since I set up on my own through the FSB and BNI and various groups, including Lindsay Burden's group, Women on Wednesday. And actually, people are pushing on with their plans. They're actually really positive because we know we will come out of this. And
Yeah.
that's one silver lining.
And I think there is a genuine valid argument for anyone that is starting up now and can make it through to when this is all over. You're going to be strong. You're going to have to go. You're going to go from strength to strength, because surviving now when it's tough, when the market's free flowing and everyone's excited and people want to get enthusiastic about things, it's a great time. It will be a great time to be, because you won't be starting up. You will already have made some noise. You'll always have already be part of networking groups, crowds. You'd have already
Yes.
done the difficult task of trying to find lots of people, and there'll be lots of people who like your ideas and what you're doing, but they're like, I can't do it right now. I can't do it right now. And I honestly think for a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people there'll be a flood of customers, a real influx.
Yeah, yeah. Well, fingers crossed. But yeah, no, I think so. And there was a headline. I didn't read the story, but the headline on the Guardian website this morning was something about a spending boom set to come as lockdown lifts. And I think there are lots of people. There are lots of sectors that will really benefit.
Yeah,
Travel as soon as we're able to, and as soon as it's safe. Retail. We saw a bit of that before Christmas, but where and people, for some people who've carried on working, albeit from home, haven't been spending money in the same way that they were,
no,
before the pandemic. So they've got disposable money to spend as the restrictions are lifted. So I think you're right, and in business as well. Everyone's had to sort of pivot and change their plans, and some of that will stay, and in some ways, other things will come back into focus. So I think there will be a real boost to business as well, as restrictions are lifted.
absolutely. And I'm just conscious of one thing because we're a few minutes in, and we haven't actually mentioned your website, your business, or what it is you do.
Yes, how's that for PR?
Yeah,
So my business is public relations, um, and my business is Loose Cannon PR. Loose Cannon because I used to have a blog of that name, and it just seems to
I
have gone
did
down
like
well.
I like that name. That
Yeah.
there's a real nice sort of ring to that that catches your attention.
Yes. There's just one friend who said, "Are you sure people want to work with a loose cannon? Is that the wisest choice?" And I
Oh, I
thought,
like.
never mind, I'm going to put wisdom to one side. I just like the name and the pun. So, and I've launched my website, which is loosecannonpr.co.uk. Delighted with it. It's been done by Steve Landon and his team at Landon Marketing and Design, who are Salisbury based marketing and design company. Um, and it's looking great. So hence sort of putting myself out there and telling people what I do. But probably the next thing you're going to ask me is what is public relations? Because a lot of people don't know what PR is, don't think it's for them, don't realize that they're probably already doing it.
Well, this is one of the things because I said to you in my email, I'm quite sure that everybody knows the word PR. They have an idea what PR is, but when asked, none of us know. And of course, one of the things that straight away, well, not straight away, last week when you sent me the press release, I was
Yeah.
like, of course, that's exactly what somebody from PR would do, because you're the only guest I've
Yeah.
had do that, and I was just like, of course, PR. That's exactly what
Yeah.
you would do. But yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
it is. But I would never have guessed that. Not in a million years. I could. Public relations is. I'm sure they do something beneficial for every company. I'm pretty sure they promote good headlines. They give you advice on how to steer out of trouble, and it's just like
Yeah.
I bet that's
Yeah.
nothing to do with it really, or just
Well, it is.
a
It is. It's
small
all of
part.
those things, and
Yeah,
it's all of those things and more. Exactly. I mean, basically, it's the maintenance of um, a good reputation amongst your well, the general public, but when you're in business, amongst your stakeholders. So if you think of your audiences, the sort of groups of people who you want to talk to, um, it's obviously your customers, but it's also your suppliers, it's your competitors, it's potential funders in your sector, it's anyone who gives out awards, as well as the media as the sort of third party, if you like, or the interim, the messengers between yourself as a business and those stakeholders, your customers and all the other groups. So yeah, the maintenance of a professional reputation is essentially public relations. But to some people, it's PR is simply media relations, so getting into the local paper or onto the local radio, or talking to you on a podcast like this. But really, PR these days is much broader than that. There are people. One of the great things of working for myself is I've been able to connect with lots of groups of people engaged in PR through industry conferences and things like that. Obviously, it was all online last year, but And they talk about things like stakeholder mapping, so working out exactly who your stakeholders are, those groups of people I talked about, working out the best ways to communicate with them, and where they hang out and all of those sorts of things. And really, they see PR as very much a sort of consultancy service. And there are people in PR who argue that PR should have a seat at the boardroom table, and be advising the chief executive alongside the chief finance officer, and the other more traditional sort of so-called C-suite roles. But that it's very much, because it's all about how your business, and the communication coming out of your business, is landing with your various audiences. And there are people who argue that your PR consultant is absolutely, indispensable to letting you know how all of that is playing out, essentially.
So, and just for clarification, I just want to make things clear for anybody that's listening. When you say stakeholder, are you referring to like customers, clients, sponsors, business partners?
Yeah, absolutely, the whole gamut.
Yeah,
Yeah, suppliers, did you mention them?
yeah,
Competitors,
yeah.
anyone who's funders. So in Wiltshire Creative, where I worked, obviously, the Arts Council are a huge funder of arts organisations, so they're a very important stakeholder. Wiltshire Council, for the same reason, a very important funder. Salisbury City Council, and there will be businesses who absolutely want to have a stake with local authorities. So Salisbury City Council and Wiltshire Council will be an important audience for them to communicate with about their successes, and all of the sort of stories about their business that they want to get out. So yeah, that's what I mean by stakeholders. Yeah.
Yeah, because it is like you say, we there is almost. Would it be fair to say that there is it also overlaps or that marketing overlaps the PR role?
Yes, yes. Um, I mean, I think PR sits within marketing as a discipline. And I think PR works best when it's integrated with all of your sort of marketing activity, which is why I said earlier, I think, some people perhaps don't realize they're already doing PR.
Yeah,
But if they're doing any form of marketing, and everyone in business is doing some form of marketing, they probably are already doing public relations work, simply by having a Twitter profile or an Instagram profile, or a Facebook page. If they're anywhere on social media, that absolutely falls into public relations, because it's maintaining an image, for your public, for your audience.
and what do you um, what do you find that people do right?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, Well, some people are very good at recognizing news. So I've been working with a few local companies who I met through networking groups. And one had just recently won a couple of awards and was about to acquire another business. And he knew, therefore, that he had news to get out. So he just wanted to talk to me about media relations and that side of PR, as opposed to sort of strategy, which I haven't mentioned. But I think strategy needs to be part of PR. We can come back to that.
I'm writing a note
Um,
right now.
yeah, yeah. Um, so some people are very, very good at recognizing that they've got stories to tell. Others might sort of sit back and think, I haven't got any stories to tell, and it needs teasing out, because absolutely every organization has got stories to tell. We all talk to other people in our lives about our work, and we're essentially telling stories. And what I can help organizations do is sort of shape those in a way that can be presented to their audience and the public through the medium of, whether it's print or whether it's radio, or it might be a podcast, it might be a blog, it might be their social media, but getting those stories out there, essentially. So yes, that's what people do right. And some people do their own sort of media relations as well. So as well as recognizing their stories, they might actually, um, have written a press release or got in contact with the journalist directly, to get their story out there. So I think some people do media relations, well. Others need a bit more help.
So where do you find the areas where, like you were saying earlier, you need sometimes to tease stories out of people?
I think there are lots of, really successful businesses, obviously, really successful businesses, very busy running the business, doing whatever it is they
Yeah.
do, providing um, heating solutions to people, or whatever industry they're in, um, and perhaps their marketing. They've got to a certain level with their marketing. They might have some social media on the go. Obviously, got a website. They might have some branding if they've got vehicles, vans, and things like that. They might be doing paid Google ads. Um, but they're not thinking about the stories that they've got in their businesses, the people they've helped, the way they pivoted during the pandemic and lockdown. um, they might, and they're not telling those stories outwardly, so they're not thinking of PR as part of their marketing mix. And I would argue that it's a very cost effective way to get some additional publicity for what you do, by actually getting some PR around some of the stories and case studies in a particular business.
Yeah, because I mean, you mentioned earlier, everybody, all the media outlets need news. So, in a
Yeah,
sense, what you have is a currency that can be used for them without,
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, and it's
I mean,
I
all the media, yeah, whether it's print or radio, they're desperate for content and they love talking to local businesses and hearing what local people are up to, because that's essentially as people behind all of those businesses. And it's those people we want to hear from. Um, even a non-commercial station like BBC Wiltshire, you know, its bread and butter is hearing from people in the county and what they're up to. So, um, you know, it really is. There's a big opportunity there, I think, to tell stories.
and who are you? Do you have any ideal sort of customers?
Um, I mean, I've sort of got two groups of ideal clients because I was a journalist for 20 years before I went into PR and communications. And I wrote about the media industry. I was up in London for some of that time, and then I was freelance down here in the West Country. And so I'm looking to support media companies as well with their PR and their communications, copywriting, that sort of thing. So that's one group of customers. But then my second group of customers are local organisations and businesses, local to us here in Salisbury, but sort of across the southwest, really, where I can really add some value to what they're doing, with some great PR. And all of that needs to start with strategy, which we could come on to. But just quickly,
Very nicely done.
yeah, I'm not looking at any particular sector. So people sort of say, are you focused on the arts, for instance, because that has been my recent experience. And the answer is I'm open to working with people in any sector, which I know is doesn't help in terms of narrowing it down. It's more about um, sort of turnover. They've got to be big enough to be able to invest in a bit of PR. So turning over a decent amount a year. But other than that, I'll work with people in any sector, and I will go and find the media and the journalist contacts that I need for
Yeah,
that particular sector.
I must admit, I did think when I worded it ideal clients, I thought that did actually sound a bit clumsy because
No,
it,
no, no. I'm asked the question a lot.
you
So
know,
that's
but
fine.
as soon as I said it, like, that's probably not the best way of trying to sort of distinguish what customers work well with PR agencies, what
Yeah,
customers would work well with you, as opposed to sort of, you know, it is one of the all industries have kind of what I would refer to as ideal clients. Like I
yeah,
coach people, so it's somebody who's willing to change or willing to be self-reflective and willing to have difficult, honest conversations with somebody where you can actually say to them, look, where's your responsibility in this? They're
Yeah.
my ideal clients, you know.
Yes.
But if you kind of like, well, it was them. It's like, this is just going to be a headache for me, and I'd rather not. I'd rather we didn't work together. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but it's very difficult sometimes to word that in short form. So it is,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah. We're very similar in that sense, in that, I've got ideal clients and there are characteristics
Yeah,
to the ideal clients, but it's not sector specific. It's more about them being
characteristics is it?
open to,
Yeah, characteristics. I
yeah.
think is a very good. It'd be a. But what characteristics are your ideal client?
So they either understand PR to start with, or they're open to be persuaded of the value of PR in the way that I hope I can sort of put across. Um, like they need to be honest, prepared to be honest with me, because there's no point in me offering consultancy to a business if they're not going to be,
Yeah,
honest. Um, and um, it is that sort of and they've got to be ambitious for their business, which actually loads of people are.
yeah.
Although I think if I'd started in the first lockdown, I think there would have been a lot of negativity around because it was such a shock and everything literally did close down for a few weeks. But then quite quickly people started to sort of
We have kind of bounced back
pivot
well.
and embrace digital. I mean, the embrace of digital technology has been, sorry,
We have kind of bounced back well.
yeah, I think we have.
Like you said, the first
Um,
lockdown, people like, but now we're like, no, we have to make the most of it. This
yeah,
kind of
exactly.
the stereotype stiff upper lip is coming.
Yes,
It's like,
yeah.
well, we just
The
need to get on with
Stoics
it.
have come out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And I think, we can see that there are some silver linings to what's happened, I mean, some of the way things slowed down back in March and April last year, it helped that we had some beautiful weather, but we were able to sort of slightly reset, take stock, bring with us the things that are important to us and nourishing, and perhaps leave some of the worst habits behind. And now I think we're working in a way that's much more well, just less travel, for instance.
Yeah.
It's much more environmentally friendly, and I wouldn't have been able to do all the networking that I've done if I had to travel to all of these
Oh,
meetings. And
crikey, no.
it's been great to be able to be in touch with so many people from the comfort of my sitting room.
No, it's true because that's something is very relatable to me because obviously I started this podcast during the first lockdown and
Mm.
everybody was, it's like, well, I do them by Zoom. Oh, I know Zoom. And now everybody, you say Zoom to somebody, like if I'd have said Zoom to somebody in 2019, 90% of people would have said no.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
exactly.
Whereas now everybody's like, it's on Zoom, yeah? It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I used to have to ask if people had used it, if they knew what it was.
yeah.
Whereas now they're
Have they
just,
got it? Yeah.
yeah. Whereas now they just say, "Oh, you're going to send me a link." Yeah, I am. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And it's been a godsend for me.
Yes, really opens up opportunity. And I hope that, as obviously it's great to meet face to face as well, but I hope that we'll become a bit more discerning about where we need to travel for things, for a face to face meeting, and that we'll keep some of this digital meeting going forward. So we'll have a sort of a hybrid, I hope.
I think we will. I think, like you say, there'll be possibly some first time. I think it was split into two things. There will be possibly first time meets that need rapport will either be done face to face or Zoom, or
Mm,
then if there's a strategy thing afterwards, that's right. Well, let's come in and bounce ideas off a whiteboard, or let's
yeah,
just chat over Zoom. But
yeah,
I think there'll be times when we want the face to face connection, but then after that it's like I don't need the 45-minute drive.
yeah, exactly.
So let's just do it, and let's just do it off Zoom. And people who know they need the meeting, but like you don't need to drive in, we can do it on Zoom. It's going to be fine because
Yeah,
we've
yeah,
either we
yeah.
already met, we already know what we're talking, or the other one is I don't want you coming in if we're not actually going to work together long term. So let's just do it on Zoom
Yes.
and see how we connect. So I think you're right. There's going to be a wonderful hybrid moving forward where
Yeah.
everybody does a little bit of both.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And they do say that, the embrace of this technology has been accelerated, by about 4 or 5 years just
Yeah.
in months of pandemic that we've had. So,
So bringing
yeah.
it back to strategy.
Mm, strategy. Well, so strategy, if you look at my website, the first sort of service that I offer is strategy,
Yeah.
because in an ideal world, I think that's where all of my activity with a business should start, with a strategy. So we agree. For me, it goes back to basics of, what's a business's sort of core brand purpose, what are its values, um, extrapolating from that, who it wants to talk to, on which sort of channels. So are we talking about printed media? Are we talking about radio? Are we talking about social media, website, blog? Probably a combination, but literally getting back to basics, and sort of working all of that out with um, the business, um, and then getting an idea of what we want to achieve through our public relations, and ideally agreeing some sort of key performance indicators, or some means by which we're going to measure the impact of the PR that we put in place. So we've got an idea of sort of closing the circle essentially, and coming back and saying, well, yes, that really worked, or actually that didn't have the impact that we hoped it would. Let's tweak it, and let's try again. And I think I mean, the benefits of PR, it is different to marketing, in that marketing and advertising, it's all often about sales and achieving those sales. The benefits of public relations are slightly more longer term. They are reputational. As I say, it's about managing a favorable reputation. um, they're about brand awareness, and credibility essentially for um,
I might be. This might be a bit clumsy, and I might be definitely getting it the wrong end of the stick. But would it be fair to suggest that the difference between PR and marketing is that I need to trying to figure out how I'm trying to articulate. But there's something a little bit more personal about what you're trying to reach out with PR. Whereas
yes.
sometimes with marketing, it's just let's aim for an age group category and chuck out some adverts. Whereas PR is sometimes more about who we are
Yeah.
rather than here's my special offer.
Yeah. Well, and especially, now here in early 2021, having been through the past 10 months that we've all been through, I think it is, yes, definitely about conveying personality. Um, and I think, we're operating in the world. Another one of the silver linings of what's happened is that brands have become much more personal in the way that they put themselves out there and communicate. If you look on, there are people who highlight various things on Twitter, and the way brands respond on Twitter is a more sort of more personal. They've had to kind of drop the corporate
Mm.
facade, because we expect even really big faceless organizations to show some personality. And within those organizations, it's probably the PR team who are managing all of that.
So when when you were talking about strategy, you said one of the things you talk about is the medium that you try to connect people with.
Yeah.
Are there, in your experience, are there without having to commit? Do you know what I mean? Because I don't want people to say, "Well, you said this on a podcast."
Yeah.
It's, you know, but do you find certain mediums, different suit different industries better?
um hmm I don't know, I'm trying to think. I mean, I suppose
Well,
there
uh,
will be certain industries which are particularly visual,
yeah,
and therefore there are certain social media platforms, obviously Instagram, um, that might lend themselves. But actually everything, thinking on my feet here, everything's become very visual. Um, Twitter now, it's unusual to have just a text-based
Yeah,
tweet.
but that's
Often they
probably
put a photo.
the fact that it was difficult to come up with any examples is probably the best example. That no,
Mm.
do you know what I mean? Everybody can adapt to every medium. You don't
Yeah,
just you don't just have to go down one alleyway, one direction. So
no.
that in itself was like, okay, so that's the answer to the question, because there wasn't one
Yeah,
like,
I think so. I think so. Because I was thinking about Wiltshire Creative when I was there, and I was, PRing productions that would come to the Playhouse and events at the festival and the art centre, and actually, sort of nothing was off the table. We wanted PR across the board, across radio, television when the story was big enough, and printed media, as well as our social media channels. So yeah, I think probably for any business, you want to get as many communications channels as you can possibly get.
and is there like a 3-step process for people, if they're listening, like to develop a narrative to reach out to people? Do you know what I mean? Is like not not quite do's or don'ts? Because like the what do you do right? I always prefer that question as to what do people do wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
when you say to someone what do they do right, they somebody listening can find that of use. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yes.
oh, if I do that, that's a good thing to do. So is there like the way that we like actually you being in PR, Lindsay did the thank you very much, Lindy Burden, by the way, who did the introduction. You then sent out a press junket because you work in PR, so
Yeah,
the press release came through to me, and it's like, oh yeah, of course
yeah,
you would.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? But it explained a narrative of who I was dealing with, and who you were. It had all your
yeah,
history on it, your
yeah.
background. Like literally. I mean, I know I've mentioned it already, but it's impressive because one, I've never had one before, so I was just like, I kind of felt briefly that I was quite.
Really, first press release from a PR person.
But it
That's
actually,
good.
being sent it made me actually feel quite important. I was just like,
Mm.
oh wow. Do you know what I mean? So this is,
You are. You're a
I,
podcast host.
I've been sent a press release, so I must be hitting the big leagues.
Yeah, yeah.
So but it presented a narrative.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
I think that there are a few basic steps. I mean, certainly, there are lots of steps that I could relay in terms of communicating like a journalist and the way a journalist would expect. So, uh, but to sort of go back from that, I think it's about it is those issues of working out who your audiences are, where they hang out, so what they're reading, what they're watching, what they're listening to. So then you've got an idea of who you need to be talking to, and then you can think about the journalists within those particular outlets and building relationships with those journalists. And then I think it is about, if you're talking about media relations and getting some coverage um, by those target journalists that you've got in mind, I think it's about communicating with them, as I say, in a way that they would expect. So I think just a press release is a very, very useful tool. And I did a live with Lindsay actually on
yeah,
her Facebook page last week. And there are a few very basic things that I can share about how to put together a good press release.
yeah, that'd be perfect.
So I think obviously you start with a Word document, but please, please, please put your company logo in there, as a picture, either top right, top left, doesn't matter. Could be in the header, or it could just be, at the top of the page. But it's effectively, it's looking like letterhead. It's looking professional. Um, Label it as a press release. It sounds so simple, but you'd be surprised the number of people who just start writing a story or their news or whatever. Um, they might have the foresight to put a headline on it, but they won't say in capital letters press release, and it just tells the journalists, like when you received it, oh, I know exactly what I'm getting here. It's
Yeah,
not a letter to me or anything, it's a public
it did. No,
um,
it did. Sorry to
piece of
cut you
info.
off. It did exactly what you just said. It did. As soon as I opened that up, I was like, I know what this is. I knew
Yes,
exactly what it. It
yes,
sounds so daft and simple, but that is like, as soon as I opened it, I was like, I know what this is.
yeah, Yeah,
and
exactly.
then there's the story, and I was just like,
That's what it says on the tin. Yeah.
and I know it sounds silly because it did actually kind of blow me away because it was the simplest thing you could ever think of to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. It's working.
Yeah, yeah,
um, and then I would say always add a date so the journalist knows, when they've received it, when it's been sent out. um, and put either, for immediate release, if you don't mind, when it's used, or I was saying before, you could add an embargo. So that might be if you're sending something to the journal on a Tuesday, Salisbury Journal on a Tuesday, because that's when they get the bulk of their news stories in. Um, but your website isn't going to be updated until Wednesday night or Thursday morning when the journal's published. You might want to embargo the information so the journal doesn't, if they see fit, put a story on the salisburyjournal.co.uk website
yeah,
before your website is ready, for people to come searching for you and whatever you've talked about in your story. So either for immediate release or embargoed until this date. Um, then you want a nice catchy headline which sort of summarizes the whole thing. It might be, as with your school essays, it might be something that you write when you've actually written your story. You go back and write the headline then when you're clear. Um, and in terms of writing a story, in terms of communicating and writing like a journalist, you really want to cover off all of the sort of key questions in any news story, which is who is doing something, what are they doing, where is this happening, when, why, if you can possibly answer that, and how. And if you can answer those questions, um, you've got a good news story and a good fighting chance of getting somebody's attention. And if you look at any, take the time once you've decided which your target publications or outlets are, look at any sort of first paragraph, and all of those questions will be answered. So who, what, where, when, why, and how. Um, if it doesn't say, I've talked before about on diary and off diary stories. So if it doesn't say when something's happening, it's probably off diary. And basically, what that means is it's not super time sensitive. So on diary is anything that's literally happening today. Like, I don't know if there are any government announcements today, but the latest COVID figures that we'll probably get in the evening news, all of that is on diary. Some celebrity dying, that's an on diary story. It's going to be covered,
yeah,
as soon as it happens. Off diary is everything else. And I think, as businesses, we all have a lot of off diary stories. It doesn't need to go out this day, week,
yeah,
month even, for whatever marketing reasons we would like to get it out, but it's a bit more off diary. And I think we've all got, we can all mine our businesses for those sorts of stories. I mean, if you like, the press release I sent to you, I sent it then because my website had just launched, so I was sending it out at that time, but it was kind of off diary in the way that I could have sent that, in
yeah.
September before I started trading, or December after I've been trading for a couple of months, or it's not hugely time sensitive in that way.
No, I mean, from my point of view, it was just like incredibly organised because it's like, wow, it's exactly a week before we're due to do it, and I was just like,
Yeah,
now
yeah,
that's preparation. Um,
yeah.
you know, do you have a time scale? And again, in a very non-committal sense of when people come and approach you, it's like, look, because you mentioned that turnover can be important, not necessarily essential, but it has to match an ambition of what they're trying to achieve to make it productive to work with you for both sides. So,
Yeah.
is it a kind of like a time scale? Like, ideally, you're going to be wanting to run along a project alongside, say, what, for a month, 2 months, 3 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say not particularly in terms of numbers of weeks or months, maybe, but looking at um, the amount of time you might want for PR support. So initially, A couple of clients I've worked with recently, I've suggested it's 2 days of support, PR support, delivered over a period of weeks or months or however long it takes to
Yeah.
achieve what we're looking to achieve. So they're buying effectively, what is that, 16 hours of PR support, and I just deliver that over the course of time it takes to get in touch with the relevant outlets, get them interested, get the information over to them, ultimately hoping that we get some coverage at the end of it. I mean, I should say at this point, you know, at no point with PR can you guarantee coverage in your target outlets. So when I enter into an agreement with a client, I don't say, and all of this PR will result in X number of stories, because that's beyond all of our
Yeah.
control. That the journalist controls that, and the editors of the publications, or the radio programs, or whatever. But when I talked before about strategy and sort of measurement and key performance indicators, um, you know, we agree those in a way that makes sense. So it's about inquiries, it's about awareness and how we might measure that. It's about credibility. It's those sorts of um, um, things that we're looking at, really, rather than stories. But yeah, in terms of time, for a smallish project, it's a couple of days commitment, really, to see some outcome.
Mm.
Um,
But but you kind of answered it. So it's like, yeah, ideally you want, like PR input needs to be, it can only doesn't have to be many hours every week, but it ideally needs to be 1 or 2 hours over a few months, you know,
yeah,
sort of like, so it's all like, let's look ahead and see where we are in spring to summer kind of sort of
yeah,
philosophy, as opposed to, no, you can just buy 5 hours of my time and I'll try and do something for you
yeah,
for a week, sort of thing.
yeah. But it does depend on the project, because
Yeah.
before Wiltshire Creative had to shut again in the end of December, beginning of January, um, they managed to open between October and the end of December. And I was helping them with some PR for their Christmas shows, and before
Yeah.
that, their autumn shows. And that was very much sort of immediate. This is happening. We want to get this out. So it was just, it was a few days' work delivered over a few days.
Yeah.
So it depends on the project.
One of the things you mentioned was about audiences, and is people often talk about target audiences. You've
Hmm.
got to find your target audience, and once you find your target audience, the rest will fall into place. I've never heard people talk about how you find your target audience.
Hmm. Uh,
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
yeah, no, it is the core question. I mean, I think it comes back to talking about to those businesses about their sort of brand purpose. What are they there to do? What pain point do they solve for their customers? So then you get a very clear idea of who their customers are. Knowing who their customers are, you can also work out who their other stakeholders are, so who their suppliers are, who their competitors are. um, and then it's about, you know, profiling those people in the broadest sort of sense. What do they do when they're not being customers of your
Yeah.
business? Therefore, where do they hang out? Where do they congregate? If are they more likely to be on Facebook, or are they an Instagram crowd? That will depend on age and all of those sorts of things. Um, do they read, if they're local, do they actually read Salisbury Journal, or are they getting their news from national outlets? And is that where we need to be looking? Specialist websites and publications for that particular industry, that's perhaps where we need to be looking. Certainly in terms of suppliers and competitors, that's where they're hanging out. So it's all of those sorts of questions that help you define your audience. It's thinking about them in the broadest possible way, I think, and building out those profiles. So sort of, giving them a name, giving them a token age, giving them a profession. All of those things, making it as personable as possible. Does that answer the question about how to
Yeah, no,
find
it
audience?
does, because you said something very valuable about you got to understand, for people listening, is your business, like what is the business, what are the pain points that it solves for people, so what value are you giving people, why would people come to you,
Yeah,
and once you've established that, it's like, right, and then, like you said, where do they hang out, what are they reading, what are they not
exactly.
reading,
Yeah,
so so if you're a tech company, there's a very good chance that people who might be interested in stories that you have is going to be online,
yeah,
as opposed to
yeah,
in the journal.
yeah,
For argument's sake, it could be, like if you're anime or something like that. When Comic Con is probably a very good place for you to start trying to reach
yeah,
audiences. You know,
yeah,
you know, if you're a chessboard maker or chess into chess or something, there's no point going down the groups that are into the Premier League football. Then they're not who your audience are. But
no,
game
exactly. Yeah,
strategists are game strategists. It's just like, because it sounds simple, but it's we often get people often kind of barrel no, not barrel, how can I put it, they get caught, they get stuck in a rut because they're trying to figure out so much, and they're never asking the right questions, because it's people say, well, there's always an answer, but it's because it stems from the right question always being asked.
mm,
And
yeah,
it's when somebody like you just saying, no, what is it you offer,
yeah,
what is that business, what purpose does it serve, and who is likely to use it. So a
yeah,
chiropractor most likely is going to solve a bad back of some sort, or a shoulder
yeah,
problem or something like that, right? So then that's going to be potentially office workers, sports people.
yeah,
Just,
yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah.
they're
And so,
off.
what
Yeah,
what websites and things do those people,
yeah,
use? I mean, in terms of office workers, that's going to be very, very broad, isn't it? So,
it is.
you're potentially looking at national media there, I would say.
But
There's a great, sorry, go on.
no, Karen.
Oh, there's a great quote I read in a book. One of the things I did in furlough was read a textbook about PR, and this guy, David Beerbank, I think is his name, but his quote is, people don't care about products and services. People care about their own problems and how to solve them.
That's true.
Um, and that is so true.
It is.
And if we all bear that in mind, nobody, although it's news when you launch a new service or a new business or whatever, actually nobody really cares about that. Good for you. But nobody cares that I've launched Loose Cannon PR. What they care about is their own problem. How visible are they in their sector? And how can they solve that problem? And I can help them solve that through some canny PR. But anyone, whether it's a heating engineer or a chiropractor, as you say, you know, what problem do you solve for people? And then communicating that in an engaging way. Um, yeah, that's marketing and that's public relations, essentially.
No, and that's probably almost the best place to stop the podcast, on that final line. So
Yeah.
we may as well. Thank you. That's been brilliant. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Hope it's helpful.
It's great.